Tia here from Order of the Bookish, doing another author interview. I am so excited to share the author of this thick young adult book. This is Nine of Swords, and here I have Brooklyn. Brooklyn, can you tell us more about this story that you've written here?
Yeah, so it's a medieval tropical fantasy adventure following Prince Fynneas as he goes to the Morency Academy of Military Arts on a tropical archipelago filled with monsters, magic, mayhem, murder, and man-eating mermaids.
So when you went into writing this book, did you know specifically that you wanted this character-driven plot, or did you kind of do like a pantser thing?
Yes and no. I pantsed a great deal of book one. I planned far more in book two, but for book one, I knew the vibe, for lack of a better word. I knew what I wanted it to feel like. And a lot of people have described it as cozy. And at first I really hated the description of it being cozy because it felt like a knock against me. But then when you think about it, it is like a cozy read because, you know, the plot happens and there is action and murder and monsters and magic and crazy things always happening. But then also there are quiet moments where you're sitting with these characters who are living this life and you get to feel like a moment of reprieve from action, and it's not plot, 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 plot. It's like, okay, well, like they're 12, they're 13. They have a little friend group. Little friend groups aren't going from adventure to adventure. They're, you know, they get tired. They're people. So sometimes they got to sit and be like, wow, guys, that was bad. Let's discuss and talk about what just happened. And so in those moments, I feel like you can introduce a lot of world building and set the scene, and you get a lot of intricacies of what's going on, what's the setting like, and their physical surroundings that can also help tell the story while the characters themselves are just sitting around talking about something. So I like that aspect of it, I guess.
So definitely character-driven plots for you, and you like third-person, omniscient kind of point of view. Now, I do want to get into reader feedback, because you did say that you're now plotting more for book two. Did reader feedback influence the plotting of book two at all, or did you kind of just ignore reviews and ignore beta readers and stick to what you want to write?
So I took some criticism that came from book one that I thought was completely valid in that book one had a slower pacing. And nowadays, with especially YA fantasy books, it's like chapter two, we're hitting the ground sprinting. But like I said earlier, it is book one of 9 in a high fantasy series. So there was a lot of groundwork to lay with book one. And I didn't want to rush it and feel like people didn't know who these characters were. They didn't understand the conceit of why these kids are going to this military school where they could die. I wanted people to feel like it was a lived in world. And I wanted that like initial mystery to really build up and build up and build up and be a slow kind of burn. And so for book two, I took the criticism that it was, you know, slower than anticipated. It's not up to what genre standards are right now. So book two, you know who the characters are, you got the plot. So we just hit the ground running. It's like a dead sprint. We, you know, things have happened. Let's go. Another thing is people were like, oh, well, there's too many fight scenes and too many montages. Personally, we've discussed it. I like combat sports. Big fan of Rocky training sequences. I will live and die by training sequences. I get they're not some people's thing. They are, to my credit, at a military school. So of course there's going to be fight sequences. You have to see, you know, the character's personality of how each character fights and interacts with other characters. But a lot of that is scaled back in book two. But then for the most part, the plotting for book two wasn't in direct response to reviews. A lot of it was just because it is an undertaking to write a 9-book epic fantasy series. And you have to pull plot threads from book one and give enough answers in book two that people know what's up, but not enough answers that why would we read book three and keep people engaged. So the plotting was more of placing those little plot threads to pull in the right spots than it was in response to actual criticism.
Tell me about tropes for you. Do you think writing in specific tropes or writing to market is quote unquote selling out? Or is it better to stay true to the story that you want to tell?
What a good question. So there are inevitably going to be tropes that you fall into, and it's going to just be unavoidable. So for my story, book one is very much a coming of age story. So naturally, you're going to fall into coming of age tropes. You're going to have a mentor character. You're going to have a rival character. You're going to have found family because your character's out in the real world now trying to navigate things and grow up. Those are unavoidable tropes. I think I have so many thoughts on this. I think dinging a book because it has tropes is counterproductive because every book at this point is going to have tropes. That's why we have tropes. That's why people know what they are. That's why they have established names. Also, you want to not be subversive for the sake of being subversive, because I think a lot of, especially like movies nowadays, are intentionally subverting the genre they're in, and then it kind of, I don't know, mutates what genre they're in, and then you leave kind of like, oh, that's not what I was expecting, because I specifically went into like a superhero movie expecting a superhero movie, and then I left with some spy psychological thriller and nobody had a cape on. This wasn't what I wanted. You subverted it for the sake of subversion, and now I'm disappointed because it wasn't the genre I was expecting. Yeah. So there are some tropes that are just inherent to the genres that you're in. Conversely, I think also sticking to genres because sticking to tropes because they're expected is kind of a cop-out. So I feel I have like a twofold opinion on it. So yes, tropes, no tropes, avoid them if it's too mundane, but you don't have to avoid it for the sake of avoiding it.
Your story not only includes tropes that readers love, I love anyway, but you also have a very character-driven plot. Can you tell us more about why you chose to write that way versus a plot-driven plot?
I think the character-driven plots are more relatable if you're a reader, because most of us aren't the chosen one. Most of us at the end of our school year, don't have to defeat the Dark Lord or things like that. So just having that plot where I'm going to use Harry Potter as my default go-to because it's just a reference everybody knows. Harry is going to magic school, and we know Voldemort killed his parents. So we know at some point Harry has to fight Voldemort, and the cadence of the books is that every book Harry has to essentially fight Voldemort. So you know how everything's going to wrap up at the end of every book. Harry wins. And it's great. I love those books. They will always and forever be a part of me. But for like the character of Finn in my book, he has that Harry vibe of being a 12-year-old. Finn's 12, sorry, Harry was 11. And he goes off to the Morency Academy, and it's very similar, except Finn doesn't care to progress the plot as a character. He straight up at one point gets handed a mystery, and he's like, oh, well, that's something, and then just like shucks it off to his sister because he's like, I don't like solving mysteries. That's not my thing. So you think like, oh, he's going to go the, Harry figuring out who Nicholas Flamel is route. And then immediately he's like, no, I don't like reading and I don't care. So this is not a me problem anymore. And then he just like goes away to school and ignores that mystery. And it happens. His sister does like medieval Nancy Drewing off screen and just comes back and she's like, here's the relevant information.
I've read a lot of fantasy books in my life. I cannot, off the top of my head, think of any nights on a tropical island with palm trees. If anything, the closest might be like the Throne of Glass series. There is a scene where they're on an island and there's like a piratey thing going on. That's the closest I could think of. So I'm really glad that you did this because I'm really into the whole tropical lifestyle. I'm from Miami. I'm very Floridian. So if you could have fantasy on the beach, I'm all there.
I'm also in Florida, so I live on an island. So there's a whole thing with mangroves in there, and I like incorporating the idea of like these children who are in armor, training to be knights and commanders with their swords, trying to climb over mangrove roots and everything. And it's sandy, and they have to get on boats, and it's like gross to have sand in your boots. I just thought they were fun elements to incorporate.
So can you tell me a little bit about the publishing side of things? How was it writing, and how was it publishing? What are some of the challenges that you faced?
So writing right off the bat, much more enjoyable than trying to do the business aspect and get everything published. So I had tried to go the traditional route, and I was querying agents, and I was trying to put my best foot out there and be like, it's different, it's tropical. And everybody was like, it's not smutty, and it doesn't really fit into YA. So you're like straddling multiple genres. We don't know where to put you, just so no, the answer is no. And I found it very discouraging at first. Then I found it kind of empowering. So I have my first rejection letter actually framed on my bookshelf, and I have it sitting next to my first copy of my book, kind of like I did it despite you. So I don't know if spite motivates other people, but it helped me. But querying agents is very difficult if you don't come in with an established brand or platform, like you're an influencer and you were on like BookTube or Bookstagram or things, or now recently Book Talk. Nobody really cares about you, and that's very frustrating. They don't really look at the writing, they look at you, which seems kind of backwards. So I just decided to take it into my own hands. I started my own LLC and an imprint, Morpheus Media LLC. And I print through that and intend to, in the future, in the coming years, kind of when my stories get a bit more settled and I've got a better rhythm going, to publish other first-time authors, probably mainly fantasy. But when you take it into your own hands, you take a lot of responsibility on that I wasn't quite ready for. But as the years have gone on since I published the first book and then the second book, it was a learning curve. But I feel like I'm kind of navigating those waters a little bit better now.
I mean, that's awesome that you went through it. You went through the rejections. You got your book out there completely on your own, which like is so much better than most people do. Most people who want to be writers either never write the book or they never actually publish the book. So already you're far ahead of the game, and you did it successfully, and you did a big book and it's well edited. I've been reading through it. I haven't found a single typo, error, nothing like that. So for me, who sees those things very clearly, I am very happy about that. So thank you for editing properly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think one of like the main things you have to do is if you're going to do it yourself is you have to employ people who also know what they're doing. So I was very lucky. I happened across an editor who used to work at one of the big 5 publishing houses. So I had that person to work with, which helps. So if you're going to invest in anything and as an indie publisher, you need to invest in an editor.
Yes,
preferably one with like
you.
a good resume and like credentials and knows what they're doing and is willing to work with you. My editor, I would email her at like crazy times. And I was like, and what do you think about this? And she's like, you need to go to sleep, first of all. Like, why it's 3 a.m. But you know, she worked with me. We had like a tandem thing going. So that was very helpful.
That sounds really great. It's great that you had a good relationship with your editor. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and that can be a little frustrating for both ends. But yeah, my bookish hot take is if your book is not fully edited, don't publish it. Like, don't ask people to pay for your book if it hasn't been fully completed.
100%. I'll add in a hot take. Things will go wrong. And when they go wrong, you have like a couple of days to panic and then just fix it. Fixing it much easier than I said than done, but it's going to be done. There will be problems. Issues will happen. You go in and fix it before people find out the issues.
You said this is a 9-part series. You already have books 1 and 2 out. Are you taking breaks in between writing? Do the breaks hinder your process at all? Or do you feel like the breaks is like something that you actually need for mental stability?
All of the above. So the breaks, for the most part, are entirely unintentional on my part. I just writing and then editing and then getting it out there, marketing and promotion really wears you out. So I unintentionally am just like, I just can't, I don't have the energy to write right now. And then I end up taking months off, which then spurs me into being too panicked and anxious to sit around and do nothing. So then I write some more. Yeah, I think breaks are also necessary because you recharge. And then I also think they're a hindrance because then I'm like, oh my God, I forgot what I just wrote. And then I have to reread my own book. And my friends make fun of me because I'll reread my own books and I'll be like, oh my God, what a good plot twist. And like, you wrote it. And I'm like, I know I did. But like, it's 800 pages. I didn't memorize every single line. So like a character will say something like, oh, that's so clever. And then completely forget that I was the one who wrote it just because it's been like 2 years since I wrote it. I'm like, oh, right. Let's throw that into book 3. That's a good thing to come back to. So all of the above. Breaks, unintentional, yes, necessary, yes, a hindrance, because then you probably have to go back like I do and reread what you wrote just to not only remind yourself of those little details, but also reacquaint yourself with your own narrative voice. So I don't know about you, when I sit down to write and I haven't written in a while, my writing style can be completely different sometimes. And I'm like, well, this doesn't even sound like the same person is writing this chapter. So then I have to like reread my own stuff and get back into the habit of how I write, which I think to people who aren't writers could probably be a very confusing thing, but it's entirely true. Is sometimes you're just like, I sound not myself right now because I'm out of practice and you have to get back in the swing of things.
How did you go about getting reviews? I saw you have a little bit more on Goodreads than on Amazon. How did you get reviews in the first place? And do you have any plans to continue getting reviews?
So the Amazon reviews are, I can say 100% swear on my dog's life, they're genuine because I don't know where they came from. So every time I see them, I'm like, oh, that's nice. So I don't, like I said, those are genuine, sincere, real reviews. Goodreads reviews is a bit more of a business. So if I find like booktubers or book talkers or bookstagrammers, I'll like say like, oh, you like fantasy books? Does this book interest you? And if they say yes, I'm like, okay, well, I give you a free copy. Would you agree to, read it and have a review possibly up by this time? And they'll say yes or no. And then that's how you go about reviews. And then people need to know half the time they're not going to actually post a review. So you've lost money on it. That's kind of the game of this business. But yeah, just sending kind of like a query email like you would to an agent, but now it's a reviewer being like, here's what my book is about. Let me know if this kind of strikes your fancy, and then maybe we can work something out. But it's never, at least with the people I've worked with, it's never been like, I'm giving you a book for a 5-star review. And you've seen my Goodreads review. Like, even people who say, like, the author sent me the book, they'll say, like, oh, 4 stars. It's never really just a blanket, it's perfect, I love it, I have a free book. So I think that aspect of, like, talking to the reviewer first, setting their expectation of what book it is, so you kind of game it in your favor. Like, this is a person who likes this kind of book. I'm not clearly going to send my book to somebody who likes Sarah J. Maas, because they're not going to like my book. Just off the top of my head, stereotypes, it's not the book for them. It's totally different. So I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot. Somebody who likes hockey romance probably is not going to like my book, not going to send it to them. So you kind of have to do that research and find people who like not only your genre, but like your subgenres and the niche that you're working in, so that you have a better chance of getting a good review from them.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another author interview with me. I'm Tia at Order of the Bookish. Make sure you subscribe to all the Order of the Bookish channels for more updates on news, trends, marketing tips, and self-published authors and their books, because we have so much coming this year and you don't want to miss out on any of it. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for the next author interview coming next Friday.